Welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. Problem solvers have problems too. So here at Behind the Podium, I, Jared Cohen, and my co-host Alexander Ellis discuss the struggles, philosophies, demands, and practices of the coach, or said more broadly, health and wellness practitioner. To provide quality coaching is to enhance someone's life in an everlasting and unfolding way. This is not easy and requires a lot of due diligence and self-mastery on the part of the coach to be able to perform. So without further ado, join us as we dig deeper into the depths of the coach's mind. Welcome back, or welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. I am Jared Cohen with my partner in crime,
Alexandra Ellis.
And today we go behind the podium with a coach, body worker, movement teacher that is infinitely committed to filling her accumulator and clinical efficacy, ballroom dancer, nature lover, traveler, multilinguist, occasional beach bum, San Diego State University grad with a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology, insatiable learner, wife, and avid fan of sarcasm. Specifically, this guest of ours is the face behind Core Concepts, which is the name of her coaching practice. Her qualifications include, but are not limited to, anatomy and motion, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, functional range conditioning and functional range release, neurokinetic therapy, trigger point therapy, NASM corrective exercise specialist, performance enhancement specialist, and integrated flexibility specialist. Without further ado, it is mine and Alex's pleasure to welcome Kristina Thuaux to Behind the Podium.
Hi.
Kristina! Thank you for taking the time and chatting with us.
Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure. I will speak on your behalf a little bit more, but informally, just to say that I have been a client of yours for a little over a year. And since the get-go, I have been very impressed with your expertise, your quality of care, and your just willingness to want to tinker with any potential methodologies that are going to help resolve whatever might be my issues or someone else's that is in front of you. So audience members of the show might be familiar with our episodes with Ben Ramos, and if it wasn't for Kristina, we would not have Ben Ramos. So Kristina is the origin story behind me getting to know Ben, and so now we take it back a little further, and we're going to get to know you a little bit better. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime.
Well, I'm excited because when we did have Ben on, it was really cool for me to get to know a greater narrative of Ben, and so we'll try and do something similar here. And with that in mind, I'm curious, why kinesiology? So you graduated in 2006 with a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology. What led you down that path?
Well, ever since I was 5 years old, I wanted to be an attorney. And then in around 99, somehow I fell into personal training. I'm like, well, I don't really want to sit behind the desk all day. This is kind of fun. And I wanted to take it further. So I changed my majors to kinesiology.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And initially, I thought I'd go into physical therapy, but then evaluating it further, it wasn't really necessary for what I wanted to do, so I scrapped that.
Tell us more. What did you feel wasn't necessary?
Like I felt like going down a PT route, I would just spend another 3 years in school, where with all the like extracurricular education that I've been getting, I already can help people. So the only difference is, like, if you become a PT, then yeah, you can accept insurance. But having met a lot of great PTs, they all end up charging cash anyway, so
Right.
and not going the insurance route. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to waste another 3 years in school and $80,000 later,
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my thoughts exactly. I was like, wait a minute, I can pick and choose what I want to take course-wise and education-wise, rather than paying out the nose and taking some stuff that I might not be interested in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's cool to hear that, because I similarly for Alex and I, choosing career paths that maybe do have more structured educational paths, but similarly not going down that as it's laid out, but rather, like you, looking for education that kind of meets our very individual, unique interests. And to yourself, you're a great example of someone that probably has more and continues to have more education than someone that just is a PT, because of the path that you've chosen. You have a lot of freedom in what you want to learn, and then also how you use it. Did you have any particular athletic background that piqued an interest in personal training or kinesiology, aside from that experience doing some personal training and realizing that seemed better than accounting?
Law school.
Yeah. Like, working out's
really
way
good.
better.
I'm really good at arguing. That's why I was going for law school.
Law school, attorney, not accounting. My bad.
Yeah, sheesh.
Jeez, that was a major.
Well, since I was 7 until 14, I participated in competitive ballroom, right?
Yeah.
Then when we moved to the United States, because it's kind of hard to find a partner at that stage, so I kind of dropped it. From there, I played basketball, continued to skateboard, did a little stint on the high school football team.
Wow.
Yeah, not all that's correct activity. and like, again, skate, surf, snow, got my plethora of injuries. And then, with the personal training, and once I didn't work for a big box gym anymore, then, now what? I started looking for additional tools to put in my toolbox, and then kind of in the process of trying to fix all my own injuries, went down that path.
Right. Yeah, fascinating. That's so cool that you've had such a plethora of athletic involvement, to piggyback on the plethora of tools you now can use. Where did you move from when you were moving to the States?
We were moving from Russia.
And do you still have family there?
No. So I was born in Lithuania, then I lived in Paris, Milan, and then Moscow, and then moved here.
Wow. And sorry, you can go ahead, Alex.
Oh no, I want to talk about ballroom dancing for a second.
Yeah, go for it.
It's been a secret passion of mine. I've watched Dancing with the Stars for many a season. But ballroom dancing to me seems so athletic, because it's not just, I'm moving across the floor, but you're holding these shapes, keeping to the time, and then also performing with your face as well. Like, you're on the soccer field, I can have whatever face I want, but on the ballroom, or in the ballroom, every piece of you is participating in this, like an athletic event, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. And having worked with a bunch of ballroom dancers now from a perspective of trying to fix them, I do notice that the Latin program allows for more freedom, where you don't have to keep relying on your partners. Like, you're just responsible for your own basis support, whereas in standard, where you're doing waltz, Vienna waltz, foxtrot, quick step, your basis support are merged together, so you're really reliant on your partner. And if your partner keeps screwing up, or like for guys especially, if the woman keeps hanging on them, they end up with a ton of injuries.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that to me. That's like so fascinating how like it's one thing to sort of make sure you're moving correctly, but then to be responsible for someone else's movement, to not or to avoid or mitigate pain is a whole nother story.
Yep.
So it's been over 10 years since you graduated, and you're highly educated with many different tools at your disposal. How would you describe your approach to working with clients, and how do you weave together or make use of the large assortment of methodologies that you have accumulated and continue to accumulate?
Let's see. We'll start generally like with time, I honed in on what I want to assess. Like obviously history, like a while back, I didn't think that taking a digestive history into consideration would be a big deal. Taking like psychological stress would be a big deal, but that turned out to be huge in how the body performs. Then, just the general overall breathing assessment, sleep patterns, just start out with kind of general assessment, and then depending on what the person's issues are, hone in on more specifics.
Got it.
So that's,
yeah, go ahead.
That's kind of like my approach, to start out broad, then start to narrow in.
And as far as movement assessments or more biomechanical assessments, do you have favorites or your main go-tos that you have trended towards as of late or more recently?
I am really in love with the anatomy and motion stuff. Just with, Gary Ward put it simply, it's really all comes down to you managing your center of mass over your base of support. So you managing your body over your feet, essentially, how well you do that. So his general assessment on seeing, how does the pelvis move, the rib cage, then the head and the neck, and on top of that, what are the feet doing? That's kind of been my favorite right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how did you find out about Gary Ward's work?
I took the NKT, the Neurokinetic Therapy, and him and David Weinstock, who started the Neurokinetic Therapy, ended up working by chance together. And
oh, wow.
He promoted Gary, so I was tinkering it, like I was dancing around, like, do I take this course? It's commitment. It's 6 days. And then finally I'm like, all right, I'm doing it, because I felt like the feet, which, I'm going based on the fact his book, What the Foot.
Yeah.
Great name for a book, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. Piqued my interest even further. So then, a couple years down the line, I'm like, all right, I'm taking it.
Oh, that's cool. So it's actually been... the seed has been planted for some time.
Definitely.
Okay. And when you take a course like that, what is your process, or do you have a process of like digesting all that material, and particularly showing up at work the next day or whenever you do, and how do you go about trying to assimilate that in with the rest of the techniques that you have?
I try to assimilate, you know how it's out of the comfort zone, right?
Right.
You haven't done this before. You got exposed to 6 days of information, might retain 10%, maybe 15%.
Right.
So I try to implement it as fast as possible into so when I'm taking the course, I'm already thinking, oh, this could benefit so-and-so, this could benefit so-and-so. And of course, my husband happens to be a guinea pig.
Yeah.
The daily.
It's awesome.
Yeah, mine too.
He travels with me. So as I'm taking a course, I come back to our hotel room. I'm already starting to implement the material right in and there. So he gets the first-hand experience. Then by the time I come back, try to implement it on my clients. The beautiful thing about the NKT and FRC and FR from
Spina.
Dr. Spina, as well as Gary, has been having online support. So at my leisure, whenever I can go back and review stuff. So I constantly layer the information on. Like I'm reviewing the anatomy of motion right now, and I'm looking at some of the videos going like, we never covered this, did we? So I go through my notes and I'm like, oh yeah, we did cover this, but I have like no recollection of it whatsoever. So that's been a beautiful thing, that online support for all the latest stuff that I've taken.
Yeah, that is
that's
huge.
Totally awesome. I didn't realize that. I know Jared had mentioned that FRC had an online component, but it's really cool to hear that other training formats also are incorporating that. Because like you said, you sit there for even, 2 days, 3 days, 6 days, you take home so little because you're just so tired and there's so much information to absorb. It's nice to have another opportunity to look at it later when you can remember it.
Oh, absolutely. Because, even on 2-3 days, you come out looking like a zombie, like, my brain is overloaded.
So it was 6 days back to back?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Now, have you found that it has complemented your other tools well, or are there components of it that leave you a little dissonant in how it fits or lack thereof with some of the other practices of yours?
I don't remember who said it, but something regarding having two opposing points, but being at peace with it in your head.
Right.
So the way when I take courses, I don't look like, oh, this is completely on one side, this is on the other. I always look for ways to, how can these two benefit each other, or can I use one to solve, like what does one give me to then help solve a problem and add in another component to it.
Nice.
So that's kind of looking for complementary relationships, if anything. And then also depends on the client. The methodology used is always going to be dependent on the client and their preferences and what they're receptive to versus what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Did you and do you find Gary Ward's teaching to be does he come from like an inclusive context? Would you say that he's suggesting how this can be a complement as opposed to maybe suggesting it to be like the way?
Yes, he is very complimentary. He says, you can use this as an assessment tool. You can use this as both assessment and treatment tool, or, again, use it as an assessment and then see where your other modalities fit into it.
Got it. Yeah, I think that helps a lot.
Very open-minded.
Yeah. I think that's sort of the first piece for me is if I'm taking a course and the instructor seems to be at odds with a lot of other methodologies and disciplines. I think I've now matured where like that to me is usually like a red flag, but previously that would be hard because now I'm sort of taking in that material with anxiety about what it means for all the other stuff I've done up until that point or how it all fits together. So for people that have that kind of a like my way is the way sort of thing, it's like their baby. And they've tinkered on it. So I just take it with a grain of salt. Okay, I'm here to learn this, and then what can I benefit from? What my clients can benefit from? Yeah, that's a great point. Reminding yourself of the fact that, they're talking about their baby, so they are likely going to be more protective of its reputation in the world.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. How has Ward's teachings influenced your personal movement practice? Are there components of it that have changed the way you approach your own training or even just like your own walking?
Definitely. you don't realize what kind of compensations you have. And given that I've had a few head injuries and some severe ankle sprains on one side, like other injuries, and some chronic nagging pain here and there, I'm like, oh yeah, my foot does do that. I want to fix that now. So I've been messing around with it, and his approach is, this is a closed chain, like a human body is a closed chain system. So you also can't look at it as a dysfunctional system, because you're always like, oh, I have a bum foot or ankle. But it's actually compensating it, and for something that's not working right, and it's still making you functional, essentially. So the way you change to look at yourself and your clients is like, I'm functional. My body's just dealing with whatever's going on there and compensating for it until I give it some other input.
Oh, I like that. That's a good reframe too. This idea that, your body's actually really awesome. It's it continues to find workarounds, as opposed to this idea that it's flawed in these various ways.
And I think like we've entrenched that into our clients as well.
Yeah.
I have a client who's had 3 fractures alone in the last year due to health reasons and other issues. And after taking that course, we were talking about her last hip fracture that she was recovering from. And I'm like, look, you're actually not dysfunctional, because she was down on herself. And I'm like, hey, you had 15 fractures and you're still walking and functioning. Your body's still getting like, I'm getting from point A to point B thing, and you're doing it darn well. Yeah. And that changed her entire mindset.
Right. That's awesome.
Yep.
I feel like I can imagine with Gary Ward's work, Anatomy of Motion, that it can kind of be, it can be easy to sort of get lost in one end of the extreme, where it's like, well, now I'm so obsessive about how I'm walking, or like, oh, I've been walking wrong all my life. Or, I don't know what shoes to get because I'm worried about how my foot is functioning. But yet on the other end of the spectrum is the realization that like, wow, like I've done this well up until this point. Obviously I'm very functional. And that this material is really only going to enhance that and continue to improve, versus shine a light on what continues to be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to agree too. And just as a coach, a teacher, whenever we're working with other people, how there's always a second level of cheerleader that we take on as well. Because so many people come to us, especially when they're in pain, fearful that this pain state might be the forever future. And so it's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to be able to reframe that. Like, well, first of all, you're awesome. Your body's amazing that you've been able to work through these things. And let's see what's happening so that we can just make a little adjustments here and there so that it can reroute itself.
I agree.
Because I know you've done neurokinetic therapy as well, and you're a level 3. Is that correct? Do you do hands-on massage stuff too, or is it just the trigger point work that you do?
I do primarily the trigger point.
And so with the NKT and the trigger point stuff together, I mean, you're looking at how people move and then figuring out where these compensation patterns arise. Is that from the anatomy of motion, or was that something you got from NKT? Because I ask because I don't do hands-on stuff. Similarly, I'm a hands-off therapist, trigger point work where they're doing stuff for themselves. And I'm curious, like, how NKT and that could work and function together.
Well, let's say you identified that there's some kind of a roadblock and you need to do some manual release or some muscle testing to just confirm it. That's kind of where you end up in the NK. For me, at least, I go to NKT, some muscle testing, and then some releases, and then put them back in, whatever position was challenging, and then retest it.
So it is just as effective, or you're finding it to be effective, even if you may not necessarily be getting in there doing the hands-on manual release stuff.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I mean, are you thinking like trigger point more like self-release on the foam roller, or like the
like do you do hands-on
like,
stuff?
Yeah, hands-on trigger point release. Yeah.
Okay. Would you find that NKT is as effective if as the practitioner you're not doing the hands-on, if you're guiding them through some type of release?
Yes, it will be just as effective.
Okay, that's awesome.
I think that's why a lot of people that take like NKT, for instance, there's some just trainers or strength and conditioning, some are massage therapists, some are chiropractors and PTs, and each person can gauge it to what their capabilities and limitations are and use it and still get a successful result.
How do you describe neurokinetic therapy to the layperson? What would they be expecting if they were going to be receiving some NKT?
A lot of like neurokinetic therapy would be like, to me personally, like muscle testing, and then it gets deeper, but I'm not gonna get into that. I'm not that good at describing it, but like muscle testing, seeing what's being there's a decreased neural drive or increased neural drive to which muscles, and then you try to figure out where the dysfunction or where the disconnect is, and then try to incorporate it back with the movement. So you're not just releasing stuff, but you can guide them in self-release and then put them back into the movement to strengthen that pattern. That was, let's say, getting a decreased neural drive.
Got it. So I remember when we first were working together and you did some muscle testing on me. And one of the things you mentioned was that Dr. Spina is not as much a fan of muscle testing. And I bring this up because I think it's a good example of those of us in this world of coaching and providing service to others where, again, kind of like we have this one tool that maybe is not best friends with another tool. And I just wanted to know more about kind of, what your sense was of making use of muscle testing with also Spina's work as sort of your way through in order to do what you thought was going to be most fitting.
Well, probably like when I was treating you, I'm like, okay, well, I need to see what's getting an increase or decrease neural drive. Like for me personally, I've seen some success with it. Some other people may not,
Right.
and they have a bias. So I go with what I feel is going to work the best for me. Then I know Spina's work is great. And I told you that reminds me a lot of dance training.
Right.
Like hardcore dance training as well as martial arts. So I know his stuff works. So okay, I'm gonna go with the assessment that I feel is gonna get me the most results or what I'm looking for, and then I'll implement his strategy as well.
Cool. So it's totally just like absorb what's useful, discard what's not, and add it based on what you feel like is relevant to your own clinical experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are you looking for when doing the muscle testing that can then be used going forward with further interventions?
I'm looking for, a lot of times like some muscles increase neural drive, so they'll fire, and then the opposing will be a decrease. So you're looking, it's not like black and white, oh, this one falls down or this one stays up. It's more neurologically how you're responding. So the pressure is never really like an intense resistance. It's more seeing how the neurological response that you're getting.
Got it. And so if you find that, let's say one, like the left quadricep seem to fire as well as the right quadricep. What is sort of your assessment that you're then going to take from there?
Well, then of course you have to ask why.
Okay.
What else is present? Like, what other assessments have you done that led you to test the quadriceps? So kind of, getting the big picture sort of.
Got it. Okay. So it's in a lot of ways, it's another tool for just gathering more information.
Absolutely.
Got it. Okay, cool. And have you, going back to Gary Ward's work in Anatomy in Motion, is there an example of your practice recently where you've incorporated those two, muscle testing with also the Anatomy in Motion work, weaving those two together?
Not lately.
Okay.
I have been doing a lot I've just been reviewing the Anatomy in Motion, getting through like the details, getting all the positions and the, tests right. So I'm still in that absorption process of information.
So based on what you have absorbed, I'm curious, what principles of foot mechanics would you suggest all coaches of movement should be aware of and using to guide how they coach their clients within the realm of performance? Because I feel like the foot stuff is obviously huge, and it's maybe garnered more attention with like minimalist shoes or more barefoot training, but there still seems, in my opinion, to be a pretty big blind spot in how the actual strength conditioning coach or group class teacher is actually helping someone better understand how their feet can assist with the rest of their body.
So a while back, I was taking Kung Fu lessons and Tai Chi lessons, and the instructor kept hammering it down. You produce force from the ground up. You produce force. I'm like, all right, cool. I know that from physics. Mm-hmm. So, but what does that mean? So then after taking Gary's class, like, oh yeah, you produce force from the ground up. So then his other big statement that stayed with me was each foot or your feet are entitled to pronation, being ability to pronate and ability to supinate. They're entitled to it. And let's say if one mechanics of one foot are lacking something and compared to the other, in gait, you're going to produce force differently one foot from the other. That force is going to dissipate up the system and it's going to impact your body, right? So to me, the big thing is now, when assessing the foot mechanics, can both feet pronate, supinate? What are the limitations? And can you maintain that stable while they're pronating or supinating? Can you maintain that 3-point, the tripod, the first and fifth metatarsal head, as well as your calcaneus? So that's the big thing to kind of strive or look for.
So would you say then that potentially, in a general way, actions of pronation or supination are not as problematic as long as those 3 points of contact, first metatarsal, fifth metatarsal, and the calcaneus, are all still remaining in contact?
So there shouldn't have a problem if they're, well, like in the basic, like, yeah, you shouldn't have a problem if you're maintaining your 3 points of support or 3 points of contact, then you're able to properly it'll be a controlled pronation, a controlled supination.
Got it.
It's only becomes a problem like if you're stuck on one or the other.
Right.
This is where Gary's points are kind of aligning with Spinas, for instance.
Right.
Spinas says make your shit work nice, so make your foot work nice.
Mm-hmm. So, like, would you be less? So, just kind of drawing in another thought leader in the space. So Kelly Starrett is always cueing that in a squat, he doesn't want the navicular bone to drop. He doesn't want that navicular drop, which technically is pronation. Now, would you suggest, potentially in opposition to that, based on kind of Gary Ward's work, that the drop would be not necessarily an issue as long as those 3 points of contact are being maintained, that it's more of like a functional pronation?
Well, it'd be like more a controlled pronation. Maybe if you're like under a superbly heavy load, you might not want to see much of a pronation, but then, I don't know, and this is my personal opinion, obviously. I would, if I'm lifting heavy shit, I wouldn't be focusing on what's my arch doing.
Got it. Okay, that's a good answer.
I would want to be focusing on lifting heavy shit.
Right. Yeah, though that brings up another good point. It's like sort of knowing when are the right times that this is like a necessary context. So maybe potentially like in a warm-up, that's a time where you would want to be more mindful to cue your clients about foot position and foot control. And I know one of the big things you've had me focus on is not scrunching my other toes, which I've become overly obsessed about. But to your point, like if I'm back squatting a lot of weight, that's probably not the time I want to be too in my head about toe scrunching. Yeah, absolutely. Like when you start being bogged down by little things, and then all you're worried about is just 10,000 things that are going on in your head. Is my head correct? Are my shoulders back? And et cetera, et cetera. Then what does your squat look like? Right, for sure. So what advice would you give to coaches to kind of like toe that line, in a sense of like wanting to help their clients pay attention to the details or find the right times to improve some of these mechanics without getting lost too much in the details that they can't perform? Or, if this is some kind of sport specific training, they can't then take that training and do their sport in a more seamless way. Well, yeah, like you'd want to practice the little things, like the little corrections in practice, and then once you perform in your sport, just perform your sport. Okay. Yeah. Got it. And is it to be assumed that the more coaches can be coaching their clients with their shoes and socks off, the better, so that they can see this stuff? Yeah. I mean, I have, I go both. Sometimes I have my clients without shoes and socks, and other times shoes and socks on. Okay. Just depends on what you're doing. So you don't feel like, it sounds like you don't feel like there are particular rules or principles that would help enhance the coaching experience based on your further understanding of the foot and foot mechanics and just how critical the foot mechanics are to the rest of the body? Well, like in Gary's thing, right? I know the book's like What the Foot, and a lot of it is foot. Foot, yeah. It's actually, it's a lot more than that. He looks at your center of mass travels a specific trajectory over the base of support, right? If you have, let's say it's a nice curvy line, and then all of a sudden you have somebody with more straight lines. So you're going to see some movement patterns that are going to show that off. Like they're not going to be comfortable going in the frontal plane, like moving in the frontal plane, or there's going to be restrictions in the transverse plane. So that's going to kind of already show you there's something not right. There's something not right with the way their center of mass is going through the base of support. And then for you to identify, you just use the assessment tools. Got it. And then you can incorporate that fully back into the movement, like what we've been doing with you. We're not just focusing on the foot mechanics. We're also focusing on what exploration of that base of support so you can move better. Very true. Right. Starting with the foot and then seeing what's happening upstream that now we can maybe address separately because of what we understand maybe at first based on the foot.
And he said, like, if there's something going on at the feet, it's going to translate up into the rest of the body. And let's say if you started out with a foot injury, that's going to impact the body because you're obviously going to walk differently. But if the injury happens somewhere above the feet, it's going to trickle down to the feet eventually.
Right.
So, like, from his perspective, he said you can, if the injury is somewhere above the feet, you can try to fix it, but he's gotten more results by fixing it from the ground up.
Got it.
Do you do your assessments barefoot and then use that to inform where you go?
Definitely.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Starting out with the just assessing where the bones are in the feet, what's the alignment, then doing mobilizing the foot, seeing if everything moves nice or if there's restrictions, and then also taking a look at the rest of the body, what's going on there, are there any limitations, and then seeing where does that fit into a gait pattern. Which phase of gait, because Gary did a great job at mapping out all phases of gait, and not only from the foot perspective, but also how does that look in the rest of the body up the chain. In fact, I believe like in the foreword of the book, I'm just going to read this quickly. Like David Weinstock mentions, the beauty of Gary's work is that it addresses movement dysfunction with the client in the position that is the basis for every activity, the gait.
Right. Yeah. We're always walking.
So again, like, taking a look at that closed chain system, like if something's not right with the foot now and they're skipping, they can't get into one particular phase of gait, for instance, what does that look like in the rest of the body? And then correcting that and putting them into it, making them comfortable in that phase. And then everything kind of falls into place.
Yeah. And as a yoga teacher, I mean, people walk into my room barefoot all the time. And it makes such perfect sense to like start from the base up. And so I'm just like thinking now, like the wheels are turning. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I really should be reading this book and I need to learn more about the foot. And I was just, reading about the windlass effect today, actually, which is the almost like the tension that's placed on the plantar fascia when the toes extend. And for the longest time, I was like, oh, spring in your step, spring in your step. And today it just clicked. No, it's the stretch of the plantar fascia makes the foot rigid, which then helps with the push off, correct?
Absolutely. And he covers that as well in the course extensively. Which
is why you don't want me scrunching the toes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Like light bulbs.
You just like hammer toes, don't you?
I'm telling you, man, those hammer toes, they are like long friends.
It's like a new trend.
Yeah, you gotta love the things that are hard to get rid of.
Well, like on the physical sense, like we've covered everything physically, but think about it this way. So if you don't follow that trajectory of how the center of mass travels through the foot, all right, you just got like more of a straight line. There's no frontal plane movement. Transverse might be missing. Think about it, what that does to your thinking. Like, are you going to be open-minded or are you going to be more closed-minded? And that trend, because your movement abilities translates into or extrapolates into your thinking abilities, your ability to intake new information, And he actually recently posted that by not exploring all the areas of your base of support, your internal horizons become limited. So you spend time in some of your base of support instead of all, and use a reduced amount of brain power to manage that. So your axis, like your all areas pass axis, has expired and needs renewing.
Yeah,
I thought that was kind of cool.
No, it's really fascinating. Also lends credence to the movement nutrition required for walking in various terrains, right? Like walking bare feet on sand and grass and rocks and just kind of like how potent those different the access and to the variation in those stimuli can be.
Definitely. Like, we definitely have a lack of that.
Yeah.
As a society.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's hard to conquer that one. Well, here's kind of taking a step back a little bit, and then we'll hit you with some rapid fires. But before we do, I'm curious how you describe what you do to others. Like, what's the title you like to use, or how do you juggle that one? Because I empathize with that struggle.
Yes.
That I think definitely comes, especially with those of us that are sort of very much driven to acquire so many different skill sets that allow us to help in a lot of different ways.
Hey, I just tell people I pick heavy shit up and put it right back down. I'm a trainer.
That's your go-to, huh?
Strength and conditioning. That's all I do.
That's
oh my gosh.
You're gonna leave him at that?
So I know. I'm like, no, tell me more. You just told me all this other stuff. You're like a strength and conditioning magician or something.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah, I'm a trainer.
Do you like that term?
And then I do a little, and then I do like a little soft tissue work.
Okay. See, this is the sarcasm.
I know it's coming.
Well, because you know what? It's like, and I do this, and I do this,
right.
and I do that. Yeah, I'm a trainer.
That's why I prefer coach. Hence the title of this show. I feel like trainer has been kind of butchered. It's sort of like, I don't know, like personal trainer to me seems very vague and maybe kind of like babysitter-esque, like, oh, like personal trainer, like get those reps in, kind of just like, cheerleader.
Right. I count reps.
Count reps. Count reps. Keep track of the time.
I'm horrible at that.
Yeah,
I'm horrible.
I'm bad at that too.
I always make them count. I'm like, do 10 or so.
Yeah. They end up not doing all of the requisite reps.
I'll probably stick with like strength and conditioning, and then soft tissue. That keeps it simple for people, because if I start going into the details, a lot of times it's like over there.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the word that I used, body worker?
Body worker's fine.
Okay.
I like the can I get a massage? I don't massage.
Oh, okay.
You will not be relaxing in this session.
Yeah, and I agree too, where you want to find a way to describe what you do without losing people, which I think sometimes people get so tied up in like creating words and new descriptions. And then at the end of the day, it's like, well, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
So trainers, or strength and conditioning and trainer, it's simple, it's to the point. Get the magic to happen, and then out on their way.
Well, it's like, if I can't describe it to a 5-year-old and not losing, chances are I'm not going to go into those descriptions. I'll be like, all right, we do a little soft tissue. There's different ways to test for stuff, and we're going to take a look at your gait, which is completely not what they're expecting. They're thinking I'm going to look at them walk, which is not what we do. And then, movement.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
Movement.
Since we have spent so much time talking about feet, I am curious for your response to people about their bunions. Because I know of Wolff's Law, and that bone is laid down in response to stress on the body. And I can't tell you how many arguments and resistance I have run into with people when I say, oh, no, the bunion is because of how you've been walking. No, it's genetic. I'm like, well, were you born with it? No, but my mother had it and my grandmother had it, and now I have it too. I'm like, ugh. So interested on your take.
Well, I agree with you. Bunions is definitely how you walk. I do know there's a little bit of like maybe predisposition, because you inherit your feet from mom, grandma, whatever. But it still comes down to footwear, your foot mechanics, if you're stuck in pronation for a long time, your body's gonna, evert the foot to go further, attempt to further go into pronation and preload that extensor chain. It's in terms of correcting them. Like if somebody's stuck mentally and that it's never going to get fixed, then yeah, you're right. It's never going to get fixed because you don't believe that it can be reverted. Other people are open-minded, and you can see some good progress with that.
Mm-hmm. Do you do any screening of clients? Or I guess, do you work with people who are not open-minded?
So that's why I'm a trainer. Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes
I'll count your reps. Sometimes it's like, all right,
that's a good
if they're getting some movement, is it more beneficial? And I'll sneak in some stuff into it. And eventually it happens that they're become more open-minded.
Mm-hmm.
That's the people that are stuck in, straight line.
Yep.
That center of mass not traveling much except in a straight line. But eventually they become open-minded, or they're curious to see what else they can get out of the sessions. So, they become more open-minded.
Sometimes just holding that space to count reps is what's necessary for the healing to begin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then they start trusting you more, so then they want to know more. Like with some clients, I didn't even tell them what the anatomy and motion course was about. I knew they've had feet issues or other issues that the foot was involved in, and I just told them oh, this is exciting, this is what I learned, and I didn't offer it to them, but with time they came and said, oh, can you look at my feet, and can you help me with this? So give them time to process, kind of.
Yeah. I dig it.
Which is great advice too, because I'm guilty of it too, where you bring on this new information and then you want to go back to your clients and just turn on the fire hose and overload them with all this new stuff. And it's important to respect where they're at too. Like they'll come and ask when they're ready, when you just, maybe drop it here or there, mention it. You don't have to overload and completely change how you're coaching just because you took this new course.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Let it marinate.
And all of a sudden it became a cooking podcast. What?
Digest the material where you want to assess the digestive system.
Peel some onion layers.
Yes. All right. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
No, but go ahead.
Okay. I'm curious what your definition of moving well is. Like when someone says, oh, this person moves well, what does that mean to you?
Like diversification and movement, fluidity.
Okay.
Fluidity is definitely are they always doing the same thing, or is their movement practice diverse?
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of responsibility should a coach of movement have to moving well?
I think again, it falls into diversification of movement, going from a yoga to right. Obviously, you have to look at what does a client need and what kind of clients you want to attract. So then, you're looking at anything from weight training to gymnastics to yoga to martial arts, for instance.
Right, for sure. What are you working on as a coach?
Right now, I'm digesting the anatomy and motion.
Okay. Fair enough. In the absorption space.
Are you talking about for myself or for my clients?
More in terms of what you're working on in order to improve your service to clients.
Yeah, I'm probably like in the digestion phase of the anatomy in motion, as well as application to myself, and
Right.
working on slowly implementing more of it for my clients, as well as other. Like I've stopped taking. I think anatomy in motion is going to be like the last course I take for the year, outside of like movement wise,
Yeah.
outside of some nutrition and blood panel stuff, because I feel like we run through these courses, and then if we don't have the time to go back and review the material a few times and process it further and retain more, like make it our own, then you just end up jumping through courses chasing the next best thing.
100%. That's a really important reminder, and I don't want to contradict the importance of that point, but I am curious to know, how many courses did you take in 2016?
She's making a face, everybody.
At least 6 or 7.
All right. And sorry, you were going to say?
No, so now, like, my poor husband, the guinea pig. As I'm reviewing like functional release or
Right.
functional range release and FRC and kin stretch and anatomy in motion now, along with others, I keep relayering, and each time, like even he notices, he goes, every time you review, you realize how much you've either haven't retained, forgotten. He gets the benefit of a lot of soft tissue work, obviously, as well as like movement stuff. So he notices, and even he mentioned how much better and more fluid I become in each one of those things I've taken as I repeat them.
Do you have any advice that you would give to course consumers like yourself, particularly the avid ones, related to making the time to review material and how best to do that, other than just making time for it?
I think it's really just comes down to like not having. Well, I mean, there's always. It's so enticing, like, ooh, this new shiny thing or this new shiny thing. It's like you have to almost like set a schedule and say, okay, I'm going to take no more than these X amount of classes, and then I'm going to set aside the time to review each one of them systematically on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've ended up doing with myself.
Nice. That's awesome. Checks and balances. You take this many, you gotta also require this much review.
Well, like Ben and I had a conversation last year in the case of FOMOs.
Oh yeah, right.
There's this
fear of
case
missing
that,
out,
like,
for all of you unfamiliar with the FOMO.
Fear of missing out. There's this conference in November in Arizona, and both of us were like, oh, this will be cool to go. And then there's an early bird discount bird discount. Really
Those early bird discounts.
Save that money.
Yeah. And my husband stopped me and said, wait a minute, you already been there. So how much new stuff are they really going to present? Okay, cool. So I looked at the presenters, and there's only like 1 or 2 new. So he goes, look, what are the chances it's going to be like even 40% new material presented? And I'm like, probably not that great. He goes, do you really think you want to spend 4 days hotel room, even though it's an early bird? Like, are you really going to get that much out of it? And after doing that, another course like 2 times, 2 years in a row, I realized, well, wait a minute, I actually didn't learn as much. Like, it's a good review, but could I have done that review from my videos that I've taken from the course? Yeah. So did I really have to invest all that money and time to drive somewhere or fly somewhere and spend that time? No. Okay.
Definitely.
So, the voice of reason at home is pretty
helpful.
It's nice that it's nice that he functions in all these different roles, like guinea pig, voice of reason, travel companion. Like,
I know.
Yeah. My better half.
Better half. That's how it works.
Aw.
What is your biggest coaching pet peeve?
I guess like the pet peeve, it's just annoying when clients don't follow through. But then again, yeah. Anytime somebody doesn't follow through, then I have to go, okay, did I give them too much? Is it too fast?
Mm-hmm.
Like the other day, I did a Skype session for the first time with the client, and I realized that I used my hands way too much to correct somebody's movement or positioning. So I really wanted to reach through the screen and correct them.
Yeah.
And, the session was stepping out of my comfort zone. Yeah.
Yeah, it's impressive.
I hung up. My husband goes, "How'd it go?" I'm like, well, but I feel like I used my hands way too much. And he goes, "Yeah, this will be good for you. He'll make you a better trainer."
That's awesome.
That's cool.
It's so true though, because
Yeah.
like I've done online stuff, and I was like, but then you develop the skill to use your words even better.
Yeah, and I learned from that experience. It showed me that I go way too fast verbally, and then I rely on my hands to correct it or provide that external cueing. So now I'm like, oh. Now that I have to evaluate my work, I go, oh, I need to slow down and maybe move slow, like a chunk a little bit more and verbalize, explain stuff better.
That's a great reflection. What about do you have a pet peeve related to other coaches? Like, not a pet peeve that clients may do, but that other coaches may do?
Nah.
Okay.
I figure everybody's on their own path,
Yeah.
Back in the day, maybe I'd be like, oh, I can't believe so and so is doing this.
Right,
But now I'm like, all right, that's more this is the space they're in. This is what they're like. It's not of my concern.
So that's very healthy, very mature. I like it.
I know, it's amazing.
All right. Well,
what happens when you reach 30s?
Lastly, what does it mean to you to practice what you preach?
Well, if I'm expecting compliance out of my clients, right, whether it's nutrition or movement, I better be doing, for myself what I'm expecting out of them.
All right.
It's like you wouldn't be able to teach a squat to somebody if you don't squat.
Yeah.
Or like this is where I'm hours on end sitting at home practicing the little anatomy and motion movements or other like FRC stuff, because if I have to feel what I'm expecting you to do or feel,
Yeah. The familiarity with the feels is a huge component in empathizing with the experience of learning anything.
Yeah, plus I wouldn't be able to correct you if it's just an abstract concept and I haven't internalized it. My body doesn't know how it feels. I won't be able to correct somebody or help them out.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for choosing Behind the Podium, unveiling the coach to be your podcast debut.
Woo! Thank you. Woo! Yeah.
This was really great. You, I really appreciate your honesty, and like I said, I am a big fan of yours and your work ethic and your commitment to the craft. So it's been an honor to get to have you voice that journey to our millions of listeners.
No. But yeah, thank you so much. I have a lot of notes here on the things that we mentioned. I know I'm inspired to go take many more looks at the foot in Gary Ward's book, What the Foot. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Well, my website is coreconcepts.co. And, the usual Facebook,
Instagram.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Instagram.
What's your handle on Instagram?
world_of_TK.
All right. So yeah, I'll put all that over on behindthepodiumpodcast.com. And thank you again for debuting, for experiencing the podcast, which if those of you who haven't been interviewed, it's a little bit scary for your first time. So thank you so much. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks again.
Till next time.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. If you have enjoyed what you listened to, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. More information on each episode and the podcast in general can be found at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. We'll catch you next time.